Hello, 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 beautiful people, and welcome back to another episode of the USL show. We are back for one of our biggest episodes of the year, assuming nothing chaotic happens like that also, planned out pro rels happening again. That won't probably be a bigger episode, but you know, that's just an annual episode at this point. And as is our USL Championship prediction show next week, USL League One. And it is time to get in, but we have a lot to talk about. So therefore, I need to stop talking. I need to know, Phil, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. We are on the doorstep of a USL season and hope springs eternal right now. So this is the most optimistic time of the year. And some good USL news to talk about. And then we get to break everybody's hearts by telling them that their teams aren't going to be good.
But except their team is good.
No, their team specifically is bad. Everybody else's team is good.
Okay, got it mixed up. Ryan, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I walked 12 miles over the weekend just in a very busy day. But yeah, I'm excited with the start of the season right around the corner. And as it stands right now, 23 of the 24 teams are eligible to win USL Cup. You know which one isn't eligible, though. We'll just leave it there.
That is fine. Look, we're just going to hit the TV broadcast news first. Big stuff. ESPN Plus is confirmed to be the other broadcast. Honestly, we all just kind of assumed that was the case until we were told otherwise. But we were told basically what it was said was no specific number was told, but 7 figures, which is a lot of money for. I think someone did the math. I think they said that means about 200,000 for each team, which for this level is crazy money. That is a massive boost to production. So that's super exciting. Also championships on CBS. That is neat. And also people were just angry that their favorite team is not on ESPN or on CBS, which is always a blast.
I'm more disappointed that we're not getting a lead-in from the Masters into a USL match, which really saddened me. I wanted to have Jim Nance say, "Hello, friends. You're going to listen to Loudoun United versus the Miami FC after the final round of the Masters."
That is the tie-in that we all needed. No, I mean, I think, like you said, it's all good news for the league with just the amount of visibility on linear TV being differential to other leagues that have gone more streamy direction. I had a lot of people doing math in my replies earlier today about how many over-the-air games MLS has, but the reality here is that this is a switch. At the end of the day, being on ESPN Plus means that a lot of people who have access, who get ESPN Plus for other reasons, have access to USL Championship in a variety of ways. Plus, we've got some games on ESPN2, plus all of the CBS stuff. It's all moving in the right direction as far as the USL is concerned. And the visibility is going to be big for the league. Plus, I think still big in this is USL didn't lose any exclusivity around linear TV local broadcasts, which I think is also very key because people who watch on local networks and don't watch over ESPN Plus for those home broadcasts, they are still going to be able to watch the games that way, which I think can easily be, those sorts of deals can be lost, or those details can be lost in these sort of big deals. So the fact that they retain those local rights as well is big for me. And I think overall, just it's good that that there are going to be games all over. I definitely get the concern around multiple streaming services being involved. It's, it is, I think that's the plight of the soccer fan right now. So certainly something to look at in the future, but right now just a lot of visibility of USL is a good thing.
To be fair, a lot of streaming services is just kind of the plight of just commercialism in general right now.
Just anyone trying to consume any sort of media at all. So
Question from the chat from Smith Video Production. Is it worth having both the ESPN Plus and Paramount Plus? Are games still going to be played on YouTube? Correct me if I'm wrong here. Paramount Plus is free, right?
No.
I think the CBS Golazo.
CBS Golazo. Yeah. Okay. That's correct.
Is free.
So I don't have Paramount Plus, if that's not obvious. So I'm not going to be your financial advisor on that one. But ESPN Plus, if you like soccer, I think just in general is good. I like other sports. So I always think that ESPN Plus is worth it. Even if the USL was no longer on there, I would keep my subscription. So if it wasn't on there and they went to Paramount Plus only, I would do both. So maybe that's your answer, but that's just me. It's $7. I mean, look, if you like European sports, like Michael Fuchs is saying in the chat, great for Champions League and Serie A, do it. I'm not someone who watches a lot of European games. I'm just not, but ESPN Plus has a lot to offer, and it seems like Paramount Plus does too. So if you're a footy fan, they both seem worth it.
Don't worry, Kaylor. Both our teams in the Premier League aren't currently in Europe right now, so.
And nor will they be, or at least mine won't.
Well, maybe. I was going to say Spurs, like, probably, but yeah. Palace, I don't know. I'll save it for other outlets, but I like Ollie Glasner a lot. So I think that was a great hire by Palace. So maybe you're not going to be in the woods forever, but Killer.
I think just to kind of get back to some of the USL stuff, one anecdote and then two larger points from it. I find it funny that the match that Hartford is hosting that will be on national TV isn't going to be on ESPN, just from being right down the road from the headquarters of the worldwide leader in sports. But we'd be remiss not to mention that there will be a Henny Derby on CBS Sports Network. And then later in the year, you'll have Spokane hosting Omaha, which is huge visibility for USL 1 for this season coming up. And that's basically, that almost becomes the one date on the calendar you want to circle for the regular season of on July 3rd, get to City Stadium, because it's going to be a huge fixture for USL 1. And then to kind of cap everything off, we're going to have the USL Championship final this year on mainline CBS. You could just buy an antenna and it'll be broadcast across the country on just a regular CBS channel, which is just incredible visibility for the league. That, I mean, this is a network that showed the Super Bowl this past year, and it's going to show an even larger sporting event this year with the USL final.
The biggest league in the world, right? Like,
don't tell the people on Twitter. Don't tell them. Anyway, that was, if people don't know, I don't have internet at my school. Whatever hosts the internet has burned down. And so I posted one tweet in all caps as I normally do. And I come back and it just says the 20 plus number. And I'm like, oh God. Drew Hunt said, wait, the league is getting some money. I'm confused. That was something that was posted, and if someone could find the source, and I'm totally talking out my tail right now, but like someone can find it for me. It said that leagues, nobody has officially announced the exact number, but it's said to be in seven figures, and the math breaks down, I think, to 200,000 is given to each team respectively ish. Mike Pendleton, I mean, that's a great, it when in doubt, guess Mike Pendleton. So like that's if someone could find that for me, but yeah, it's supposed to be seven figures, and almost all TV deals, the TV market is the one paying in, not the league paying out, almost always. Now, there was the question about YouTube earlier, and we're about to get into this USL Championship preview before we go too far into this too much, but the YouTube is going to be available, as far as I understand, international. As far as I understand, if you're international, and almost all of the matches are available for replay in the United States. So the replays of them are almost always available. So there's something for you. So if the championship is going to be on CBS, I guess they'll have to promote it during the NFL games. I didn't think about that, but I guess they would have to, huh? How about that? Anything else before we get too far into this? Because this is a massive rabbit hole we could spend an entire hour on.
I will say with the USL final being on November 23rd, that's a really kind of prime area. Like you're not going to have to compete with, I guess you won't have to compete with the NFL on that day with it being a Saturday, but with the new Big Ten deal with their college football being on CBS, you'd very likely have a lead in from a Big Ten game being held on November 23rd into the USL final.
And luckily the Big Ten is like half of the United States now anyway, so that's cool.
California, this is Big Ten country.
I do at least want to shout out John's graphic that he posted earlier on Twitter that kind of broke down how many teams in the championship were getting games on just on national TV. He broke it down by conference. No team in the league is getting more than 5, and that would be your Phoenix, Louisville, and Detroit. And then you have 6 teams in the league who do not feature on a national broadcast game. But that was just kind of how it was a good graphic, and I certainly recommend go checking it out. Yep. I'm glad Las Vegas has too.
The Loudoun, Miami, the ones that shock me, and I don't want to go again too far. North Carolina shocks me, and Orange County and Oakland shock me. And this isn't shots fired at Loudoun, Miami, or Memphis exactly, but it does seem like they are trying to avoid the empty stadium or baseball stadium as much as they can. And I don't know if like the teams that are on the baseball fields are, how many of those are away from home. I'd be interested to find that out, but it seems like they're trying to avoid that. But North Carolina draws well. Oakland draws really well. Orange County draws really well. So those are 3 that I'm shocked by. Loudoun is on the up and up, and I really believe in what Loudoun are doing, but the attendance isn't there. Miami, we kind of all know about that. And Memphis, their baseball field, and this is not rivalry speaking out of me. I promise it's not, but it is one of the, out of all the baseball stadiums, it is arguably the worst one. I know New Mexico has an argument, but I think that Memphis's ground, the actual pitch conditions might be even worse.
New Mexico's biggest issue is that when you have a game in primetime, the sun is down the barrel of the camera for the opening like 20 minutes of the game. So like not great viewing. Like again, nothing against them. It's just, it straight up is not good. So I think like that probably plays a part too. I was just going to say real quick, I saw in the chat, like the Detroit thing. We have to remember that a Detroit El Paso game last June outdrew MLS games in the same time slot. So you have to on an ESPN2 broadcast. So you have to understand that Detroit, like, I know Detroit is like a little bit of a polarizing club, but people will tune in to watch them. Yeah. So there is a reason, I think, that they've been awarded those 5 games.
And not to mention, the league certainly plays with kind of, they want to have the best display and the best showing on camera. And like it or not, Detroit has a very good atmosphere for their home games, and it's a very good display for the league. And like just, Kaylor, you had mentioned it, just from eyeballing it, none of the teams hosting a game on national TV play on a quote unquote baseball field, and Tampa Bay's one of their 2 appearances is hosting, and that's like the only one you could kind of make an argument to, but they still have a fantastic atmosphere, and the camera angles aren't terrible for any of those games. So it's deliberate how the league chose which markets they're going into for these games, because they want to have the markets with the best atmosphere, with the best camera angles, with the best optics, and just the teams that are going to be the most interesting to everyone. I think the only egregious one I've seen is that San Antonio, a team who won the league within the last 2 years, only gets 1 national televised game, which is just surprising to me. Crazy.
Well, look, it is 15 minutes in. We got to talk about every single team in the USL Championship. Some teams more than others. And we're going to share the graphics we put on Twitter. Keep in mind, if you are an audio only, you're not watching, that's fine. We'll talk about everything, but it does help to be a visual learner in this situation. We're going to be kind of switching back between the Eastern and Western Conference graphics that I posted on Twitter earlier today. And we're going to be kind of going through this. Remember, these are all fan voted. These are not our personal picks. These are fan voted picks, and it's taken the aggregate, the average score, There was math. It was me doing math. So if you disagree with where somebody is, blame the Alabama person. It always goes well. Real quick, I want to go through our Eastern Conference, and I'm just going to run through everything so you kind of get an idea. Fans voted the Eastern Conference. Number 1, Louisville City. Number 2, Tampa Bay. 3, Charleston. 4, Pittsburgh. 5, Rhode Island. 6, Birmingham. 7, Indy. 11, 8, Detroit City. 9, North Carolina. 10, Hartford. 11, Loudoun. 12, Miami. And for our Western Conference, we have Sacramento, number 1, Phoenix, number 2, San Antonio, number 3, Orange County, number 4, New Mexico, 5, El Paso, 6, Memphis, 7, Tulsa, number 8, Colorado Springs, 9, Oakland, 10, Las Vegas, 11, Monterey Bay, 12. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to go through the bottom 4 of each league first, because those are the teams that are not going to be in the playoffs. Hopefully, most of those will be quick conversations, but there's also some interesting ones there first. I think let's go through the quick ones. Let's go to the 12-12, Monterey Bay, and the Miami FC.
Yeah, I mean, for both of these teams, like being predicted last, I think like they haven't moved the needle. Like Monterey Bay is because they haven't moved the needle from last season. They essentially look like essentially the same team for all intents and purposes. And every other team in the West has gotten better, Vegas included, like by a substantial margin. So I think like them being bottom, they just haven't moved the needle enough, while every other team has done a bunch in the offseason to be in a better place. Miami, it's really the opposite. They blew up the project from last year, which was obviously like not quite good enough for the playoffs, and are replacing it with a ton of youth. It's super unproven, and there's really no evidence to go on to say like Miami is going to be anywhere but a bottom dweller, because they're just overly dependent on youth. It feels like an older version of Loudoun, if that makes sense.
And not to mention, you have a very kind of unproven manager coming into this situation. And we've gone through the Miami FC in the past, and every season, like going into the year, we were like, on paper, they should be good. On paper, they have what it takes to compete. And it seems like, and Kaylor, you've been a big defendant of this team in the past as well, that we get burned on this team every single year. And I think this is finally the season that people have just kind of changed their tune, and it's just going to be like, we need to see the evidence of the Miami FC first before we kind of show proof that it is a good project kind of worth building towards. And then, like you had mentioned with Monterey Bay, it seemed like a team that they kind of brought back all the pieces from last year, and they remained pretty stagnant. Whereas they needed to have that big kind of marquee offseason to really kind of push them towards making a playoff spot for this year before we kind of put a lot more faith into this team as well.
I maybe I'm being harsh to Monterey Bay, but I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. They bring in Markanich? No.
Tristan
Traeger, the other winger that was really freaking good. They bring in Tristan Traeger, but they lose Sam Gleadle. I think that Monterey, and they lose Hugh Roberts. Monterey Bay comes in at a net negative from last year to me. And I want to believe in the Monterey Bay project, because I do like them a lot. I like their fans a lot. The people that I've talked to within their front office. I like them a lot, but I don't believe in the project. When you miss the playoffs last year and you come in less than, it's hard to not say 12. Anything else on these two, on Miami or Monterey Bay, the Miami or Monterey Bay?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that picks this Monterey Bay team up is another season of like off the wall finishing from Dixon and Boone, but like, is that sustainable over the course of a whole season? It doesn't really feel like it.
Let's go ahead and move on to our 11th place finishers. And our first one is going to be Loudoun United. And the other one, as mentioned, was Las Vegas Lights. Keep in mind, this Las Vegas Lights prediction, most of these votes came in before they started signing all the players. So it's a little bit skewed, but maybe not too much. I want to talk about Las Vegas because this is one of the more interesting ones. I think there's one more for me personally that I'm willing to die on a hill for, but Las Vegas is one of the more interesting ones because since this came out, you could probably say they're not an 11th best team in the West. Their starting lineup looks really good, but they have literally zero depth at all. But I mean, there's a lot to talk about here for your 30 for 30, Phil.
Yeah, I mean, the the project continues. Like, there's just constant refreshing. I'm loving these, like, they're having to announce, 3-4 players at a time just out of sheer necessity. The team is good. The names that are coming in are good. Like, and I think we have to give a lot of credit to Vegas for the quality of players that they are bringing in, the people that they are recruiting for the project that they're working on now under Jose Bautista. That being said, they are still assembling this team inside like 2 weeks of the start of the season. Like, they played that friendly against New Mexico United and like apparently held their own. And New Mexico was like, we fight back, for a 2-2 draw. And I literally quoted it like, against who? Like, who was there? Like, who did you fight back against? Because we're still trying to pull out like the whole roster, right? Like, I want to know who was actually there. And I know that there's a handful of players that I'm sure they're just waiting to announce and all this stuff. And I'm sure they've had, trialists and those things. I don't think that anyone can confidently say going into this season before they see the final, whatever the final form of Vegas's roster is. I don't know that you can confidently say that, hey, this is a playoff team without really seeing the whole picture. Like, this is a hastily assembled squad, no matter how you slice it.
Yeah, I mean, you bring in players of real USL pedigree and quality. I mean, you just Solomon Asante, the name speaks for himself, but not to mention you also have Charlie Adams and Emra Clemenza as to just kind of round out a trio of very good signings. But Phil, you're absolutely right that you're bringing in players who are kind of hastily thrown together, and it's at the start of a year with a kind of beginning schedule to the season that isn't the most forgiving to them. Now, I think Las Vegas, of all the teams that are missing the playoffs in our predictions out of the Western Conference, it would not surprise me if things were to click like halfway through the year for Vegas and they would go on a nice enough run, almost I guess, an FC Montreal from the old USL days where they would just randomly reel off like 4 wins in a row at the end of the year. And then like maybe just fall short of the playoffs, but we definitely need to see a lot of cohesion from this team first before we can actually put them closer to a playoff spot. But honestly, of all the teams missing the playoffs in the Western Conference, this might be one that is worth a very buy low. They may sneak in as the 8.
Yep. Let's look at the other team, which these are kind of two hot topic. Loudoun United. I think if you don't look deep into, like, if you just look at namesake, I don't know, but I really, really like the Loudoun project. I find myself liking them more than 11th off of vibes alone. Like, I think in my head they're a playoff team, but I'm also looking at the teams ahead of them, the rosters ahead of them. I don't know how much higher you can truly put them. And this is where I would say if this Loudoun team was assembled last year, they're going in at that like 7th or 6th seed. Unfortunately, this year's East looks like it's an absolute just slaughterhouse amongst itself. I'm not saying East is better than West. I'm just saying the East is even. And I'm not sure if Loudoun breaks through the slog that is 7 through really 11.
Yeah, I mean, Cristiano Francois, Florian Valot are two really great signings that they're bringing in, and not to mention you're bringing back players like Zach Ryan as well. But if you just look at everyone else in front of Loudoun right now in the Eastern Conference, I mean, our top 8 just are like that is pretty much a mini league. It's like if you're looking at the top 6 of the Premier League right now, it's like every one of these teams are of high quality, and it's really tough to kind of break through there. So it really is just the teams in front of them just have at least more quality in the eyes of our voters.
Yeah, I think, and yeah, what Nicholas is saying, what you're saying, Kaylor, just the level has gone up across the board, and it's tightened in many ways where the good teams are still really good. A lot of teams in the chasing pack have done a lot to push up towards those top teams, and the teams at the bottom have even compressed more to where you look at the business that they've done like across the offseason, and Loudoun, like Ryan's saying, Loudoun has done a lot of really good business, and especially some of the veteran pieces that they've brought in adding to what is a very youthful squad that still returns Khalil El-Medkar, Zach Ryan, Tommy Williamson, a very like electric attack. They just gave up too many goals last year. They brought in Robbie Dambro. They brought in Drew Skundrich. They brought in some of these like veteran pieces who can do a lot to make that team a little less naive. And it still might not be enough to get better than 11th in the East. Like that's just how strong this league is this year. And I'd say the West is kind of the same, like is in a similar position.
A rising tide raises all ships.
Yeah.
That's what they say anyway. Let's move on. And I would like to go to our 10th place, Hartford Athletic and Oakland Roots. Hartford Athletic, a team who, unlike previous years, this is not one of the ones I'm willing to fight people on, by the way, but I believe in this Hartford project much more than I did last year, to be honest. I did not believe in last year's Hartford project, but I am kind of in on it this year. And the other one is Oakland Roots, where Oakland was really good until they sold off their best players last year, and they didn't replace them this year. So they're a team that was kind of always at the bottom of the playoff line. They lost their best players. They didn't really replace, and I guess you're just kind of hoping that they can grow within.
Yeah. Well, to go to Hartford, one Brandon McCarthy was in my replies today in a tweet I'll get to in a little bit, but about Hartford, he said he would stake my reputation on Hartford being better than 10th. I think this is another name game with Hartford where I think fans may be kind of aligning against what Hartford were last year. When you look at the roster, it's good. It's very good. Like there are a lot of very good pieces here. The one question mark for me in terms of like, I don't think that they're going to be 10th. Like I do think that this Hartford team probably is good enough for the playoffs. Brendan Burke, he has a track record of like making the playoffs. Colorado Springs, I mean, he was a semifinalist a couple of years ago. That being said, has he over switchbacksified like Hartford to the point where are they like competitive at the top end of the East? I don't know if they're that. Some of the weapons that they have in that attack are extremely good. And then bringing in pieces like Buckmaster as well. Like there's just a lot of very good players on this Hartford team. Can he make it a cohesive unit? I guess it'll remain to be seen. His best year in Colorado Springs was powered by Haji Berry. Can someone be his Haji Berry is kind of my question.
I was about to make that same exact statement. I think that if you look at the names on the roster, when you put the name of the coach and do the whole thing, right? This team in my brain is a Haji Berry away from being a home playoff contender.
And the thing is that Haji Berry was one of these guys, like going into that season, he was one of those like, yeah, like good player, whatever. And then just absolutely exploded. And Michigan Galena was absolutely a big part of that. Don't get me wrong. He was USL Young Player of the Year that year. I'm fairly certain. But yeah, I would say in general, there was a Haji Berry sized hole in the end at the tail end of that season where they really fell off. And in many ways, I think people wrote them off in the playoffs because they were so poor to end that season, like form wise. Anyways, can Burke get this team to that next level? Can Williams is being suggested? Could Romario Williams be Haji Berry 2.0? Maybe. I do think they are going to be, I think 10 is extremely low for them. And I think they are fighting against, they're almost in the same bucket as Rhode Island and North Carolina, where it's there are a lot of really, really good players on these teams. And are they going to be good enough collectively to overcome what are some other high-powered rosters out east?
And Phil, you make a good point, especially with Hartford kind of beginning a new project under Brendan Burke, who, by the way, still has over 300 games in his managerial career since 2008. So he knows how to just exist within the USL ecosystem. I think this Hartford team is going to be constantly compared to Rhode Island because you're going to look at not just the geography of the derby between the two teams, but Rhode Island's coming into basically the same market or kind of regional area where Hartford used to be on an island in, and is the new upstarts of the league. And we'll get to them later on in the show. But I think it's going to be really interesting to try and follow this Hartford team throughout the first part of the year. And that June 1st match against Rhode Island is going to be one that is going to be a really huge measuring stick for them kind of moving forward. But I mean, bringing in the likes of Romario Williams, returning someone like Danny Barrera, Marcus Epps in the midfield as well. Well, it's going to be a very interesting dynamic. And I guess to kind of clarify on my point, it's not the same market, but it was within the same regional area of New England.
Can I say something that might be absolutely insane? I think if you were to switch the rosters and switch the names of Hartford and Rhode Island, Hartford being the bottom feeders of the East and Rhode Island being the shiny new toy of the East, I think they switch positions. In fact, I think Rhode Island might be ranked higher.
I mean, why would you say something so controversial yet so brave? No, I think you might be onto something there. Not that Rhode Island won't be good or will finish outside the playoffs. I think they'll be very good, but no, you probably got something there. I think Hartford in this ranking, in this fan vote, has been there has been an anchor tied to them by last season. By last season's performance.
Go ahead.
Should we talk about Oakland?
Yeah. To me, like I mentioned, they just didn't replace anything. Maybe I'm wrong here, but from what I'm keeping up with, they didn't really replace anything. And Blanchett stood on his head and kept them in it until he fell apart to the XG gods, pretty much. Like, he could only stand on his head so long. Eventually every cookie crumbles, right? And it took him really till like match week 30 for it to all fall apart. And I just don't believe in this roster. But every single year, almost like RGV did, maybe they rest in peace, they always found their way to be in it, almost like the FC, like Montreal, like, and all that kind of thing. Like, they always just found their way there. But I just don't believe in it.
Yeah, I think you're right to say that. I don't think that I think they've had a clunky offseason in terms of they've added some pieces that do feel good. I like Noah Delgado a lot, and I think I like the style that he plays. And there's an inconsistency that's plagued Oakland for the last couple of years that's kept them from being, the team that we think that they're capable of being. I mean, on their day, Lindo Mfeka and Johnny Rodriguez were two of the most electric attackers in USL, bar none. and it wasn't always their day. Like that was the difficult part. So if they can take a step up, this team can take a step up as a result too. I mean, they've added Mitchie Nader Cherry, who like is sort of an X factor here, where it's like, can he do what he did to Austin FC in the CONCACAF Champions League? And he's an absolute terror in the air. They love wide playmakers. So Diaz, Tamakis, like if they're able to like feed Cherry, maybe it could just be an easy route to some goals. That being said, it does feel like they still have some pieces to add, and it is getting a little late in the game. So are they going to be able to add enough depth to hang in there with some teams that, I mean, we're looking at a lot of teams across the top end of the West that have serious depth across like their entire roster. And Oakland is just feeling like a little light right now in that way, and didn't sign any like true top end of the product like game changers in the offseason.
And you mentioned consistency. You're losing players like Danny Barber, Tarek Morad, and Emre Clemente, who are all in the top 10 of minutes played from last season, including Barber, who was number 2 on the team there. And each of these guys were center backs who anchored their kind of back line for this team. And that's a lot to replace headed into this new season.
I want to quickly move on because we are spending a lot of time at the bottom, but let's go ahead and I want to talk about our Colorado Switchbacks, who are at 9, and North Carolina FC. Now, I am going to save North Carolina FC. I know we've been doing East and West, but I want to do West and East because North Carolina FC is my fight you until I'm blue in the face win. Colorado Switchbacks, it's fine. I don't know what else to say. Like, this is, again, a situation that, Nicholas Murray kind of pointed out, and I kind of said the same thing about Loudon of, I think in years past, this Colorado Springs team makes the playoffs, and I'm not too worried about it, but the competition has gotten better, and I don't feel like they made the step up, and I think that's reflected in the fact that they're finishing 9th according to the fan vote.
Yeah, I mean, they made the big splash with Ronaldo Damas. Obviously, that did catch a lot of people out. Damas was not at his like highest peak last year for Loyal. I know that's hopefully that's not an overly controversial statement. He was very good, don't get me wrong, but he wasn't consistently starting all the time. Scored some important goals for the team. Can he be a Romario Williams replacement, like 15 goals a season? Absolutely. Is he the same sort of striker? Absolutely not. And that's where like it is a fairly big profile change for Switchbacks. So they are going to have to adapt to that. The rest of their offseason was like solid, if not spectacular. I think they are okay. And like you said, it's literally just a question of like, have they gotten better enough to keep pace with the rest of the West? And right now it's feeling like maybe not. But Damas, who knows? Damas is capable of absolutely popping off, and he could have like the most insane season, and we could be talking about Switchbacks as a contender. Who knows?
And they do start off the season with a trip to our previously mentioned the Miami FC. So that could be the immediate first match that could tell a lot about this Colorado Springs team and give them at least either a boost of confidence, or if they look sluggish against that team, then maybe there's reason to be concerned.
Reverse, the reverse effect of Colorado Springs, where rather than elevation, they get bogged down in the Miami swamps.
I want to go ahead and move over to North Carolina. Predicted to finish 9th. This is my blue in the face. I'm going to be angry about this one. I think North Carolina is easily a home playoff team. Easily. I love their offseason. Their depth is fantastic. It's really, really good. When your starting is, when you're looking at Alex Anderson, Rodrigo da Costa up top, you have Evan Conway out on the left, you have Minskin out on the right, Martin Maldonado over there, Paco Craig in your midfield, McGuire in your net. There's a lot of good stuff, and the biggest thing for me their depth is really good. If you haven't looked at their depth pieces, it is really good. And I just feel like people remember them as bottom feeder North Carolina. I know they just won USL League One, and championship fans, the League One talent is not as far off as you think it is. The League One and championship are pretty freaking close. They brought in some of the best talent from League One. They brought in some of the best free agents from the championship, and they have that on the bench too. This is easily a home playoff team for me.
And they'll get an immediate test as they have to go hosting Charleston in week 1. But like you mentioned, just the talent they're bringing up, like I think it can't be overstated that you're bringing up a person who scored 17 goals in League One last year in Oleg Anderson. I really think North Carolina FC could be a team that would be a very surprise package for this season.
I just think like the fact that when you have an attack that went that crazy in League One and then add Rodrigo da Costa to that as like the immediate sort of championship caliber veteran piece, not to mention the signings that they made in midfield with Ja'Cory Hayes and Colin Martin, like Evan Conway in attack as well. Like you mentioned, Kaylor, I just think to me, the biggest difference here, Paco Craig's been thrown out as well. The biggest difference here is this isn't like Rhode Island or, like an expansion team. This is a team that played together last year, for the bulk of them did, and they've just added strong veteran pieces. So yeah, I don't really get the like writing off of North Carolina because there's not really going to be any like time to adapt in that way. They're just going to be the team that they were in League One last year, plus some incredibly talented championship caliber talent. I think they've done wonderful business in the offseason, and I'd be shocked if John Bradford and company are not I'd be absolutely gobsmacked if they're not in the playoffs. I would be really shocked if they're not up towards the top of the East.
Yeah, let's go ahead and move on. Our number 8, we are looking at Detroit City FC and FC Tulsa. Two teams that are weirdly feels like they're going in the opposite direction after FC Tulsa were early contenders in winners of the offseason, and then their coach leaves and everybody else starts leaving too. Detroit City, who they're always just kind of there. They're going to be strong defensively. They have what you want. The big question, as it always is can they attack? But also, Danny Dicho, assuming that he keeps in the Mark Briggs style, knows how to exploit some wings, and they got some wing backs and some wingers. I don't know.
I think there is like they have done some very good business. I think Elvis Amo is like being freed from that particular situation in Hartford. And I'm not making a comment about the current Hartford. I mean, last year's Hartford. I do think that he could be a big piece, especially just as a presence for that team and an out ball, like constantly for them. I think too, John in his like season preview. So, John Morrissey is traveling. So shout out to John for all the work that he's put in on previewing this season. And you should go read it immediately. But he talks a little bit about how they're switching up and able to maybe free up Maxi Rodriguez a little bit in his attacking role in midfield, and getting him involved or more involved is gonna be a good thing. Plus, healthy Devin Amu-Mensah is an all-league center back. So yeah, there's plenty here in this Detroit team. I think predicting them to finish similar to last season, especially with a brand new coach, I think it's fair enough. We'll see how much of a step up they can make, but again, it's a packed top of the East. So they'll have trouble breaking in, but I don't think this is going to be like a big downgrade or anything for Detroit. I think they'll be kind of there or thereabouts this season.
And for the other one, FC Tulsa kind of mentioned it. Little typo in the graphic. Mostly unconfident after being one of the stronger rosters, and then it's been slowly picked apart. And I think this is weird. This is underratedly one of the most brutal off seasons that you could have after going in and not only just having hope. It's not like an injury took this away. They just started leaving right after you signed them. It is just bizarre what's happening in Tulsa.
Yeah, I mean, we're predicting this to be an 8th place team, but I think there's a better chance they would finish bottom of the Western Conference than there is that they'd make the playoffs.
It's a big question mark. I mean, the fact that when you have two players like Charlie Adams and Jeremy Kelly sign for you and then leave for other teams before they play a match for you, that is obviously really tough to take. The Blair Gavin blow goes well beyond just the manager, because I think Rucci left the team almost certainly because of that. And he's now playing in Mexico. Not to mention Richie Ryan, Blair Gavin's assistant, is now the U19s manager at FC Cincinnati. So he immediately was gone as well, when Gavin left. So that clearly had a really, really profound impact on Tulsa. I think they've righted the ship in terms of there don't seem to be any imminent departures. Now, who's to say? Anything could happen, I guess, in the next couple of weeks. They've got a good solid base here, but you could tell that some of the business that they had to do to fill out the roster was definitely not stuff that they probably had planned when they sat down to plan out this offseason. So they've got Goodrum at the end of the day. They've got one of the best strikers in the league, and they've got some very talented players. There's no bones about it. I do think the disruption is going to be hard to overcome for them, especially to start the season, and it may take them a little bit to get going this year.
Question from the chat, but is Dicho odds-on favorite to win Manager Battle Royale? Danny Stone's
looking like a unit as well, so yeah, it might be tough.
Those are top 2 ones, though.
Yeah, I'd back them. Phoenix versus Detroit, both in Manager Fight Club and Online Fight Club. My
favorite Fight Club, personally.
I thought we weren't allowed to talk about that.
Next up, we have Indy 11 and Memphis 901 FC at the 7th position. I want to start off with Memphis because I feel like this is a more interesting conversation. I like the roster I really like the roster. I'm not sold defensively. I know they brought in some real defensive studs. I'm not sold on it quite yet. I'm really not sold on the goalkeeping. My biggest thing is that their travel is a nightmare. People need to remember the fact that, and I understand, and Rob Krause brings up a good point, has 2 1-1 draws against MLS sides and then 2-1 against fringe NCAA tournament team. I get that. And yes, it's what is going on here? I think the travel here is about to be a bigger deal than I think fans are going to give it credit for. They're going to have to deal with the Western Conference schedule while being very much an Eastern Conference team. And I think that's going to be a bigger deal than anything that their roster puts on. I'm also not sold on their kits.
And not to mention, for that schedule that you had brought up, Kaylor, on 2 separate occasions this year, they have stints of 3-match road trips. That first one coming up in May of this year, where they have a particularly brutal trip to Miami, then have to go all the way out to Monterey Bay just 3 days later. And then the following Friday, they have to play El Paso in the span of basically a week and a half, which is an absolutely brutal stretch of games. And then they have another one that follows it up in July as well.
I think overall now I'm sorry, Kaylor, but the Southern Harm pipeline that they've got going on is just bizarre. When you see
Judas.
There are times where I look when I look at this roster, I just am like, why is Legion like why are all these Legion players? Like, I don't yeah. So I think like again, Memphis is a classic case of like names on the page, like they look good, make sense. Guys who are proven in the league, not really anything like to draw back on. Emerson Hyndman, I think, was one of the revelations of last season in terms of finding his feet in the championship. And I really love him in that central midfield. And balance wise, like this team doesn't necessarily feel like it's got it. And it'll be interesting to see if they are able to. I would be more worried about, like they say biggest weakness goalkeeper. I'd probably just say like in transition, is this team going to be able to stop people from scoring? And especially when you build the travel into the legs, I just think it's going to be a long year for Memphis. I think they will like be right on the edge of making the playoffs. I think it's too talented of a squad to not be in that conversation, but it does feel a little bit off. Like you said, I think I think in the long run, Jay Mims probably gets it right eventually, but
we found him.
But this year he's really just adapting back to life in the spotlight after his long sabbatical or whatever.
We wouldn't let him leave the spotlight. We just kept talking about him. Do you have anything on Memphis, Ryan?
No.
Okay. All right. Indy 11. I'm not sold at all.
See, I feel okay about Indy. It's funny because if you told me at the beginning of the offseason, like, hey, who's going to be better, Indy or Tulsa, I'd say, well, Indy's having an absolute mare like to start the offseason, and Tulsa seems like they're cooking. And it sort of ended up the opposite, where Indy ended up sort of cooking. I think at the end of the day, like the base that Lowry built in Indy is fairly strong. But it's the question of it, it's not dissimilar to like when John Hutchinson joined Locomotive. It's like, yeah, you've got a decent base of a team, and can a new manager coming in like make that function for his style, for his, how he's going to approach things. I think you can't really turn away from the fact that, preseason results don't mean everything. And Indy like absolutely pumped the crew crew 2 for like 9 goals or something like that. Augie Williams, undeniable. And putting him next to Guenzati with the likes of Jack Blake and Aiden Quinn. I know Aiden Quinn is injured to start the season, but Cam Lindley, I mean, it does on the surface feel like they've really got something there. I'm interested to see what Sean McCauley can do with them, but yeah, I don't think they've had the disaster of an offseason that it was seeming like it was shaping up to be when they didn't have a manager for, the first month or so or whatever it was.
And they are returning 71% of the goals that they scored in the league last season, which is still a very significant number, higher than many other teams in the league can say. I think one of the things that we should really be cautious of in their first 6 games of this season, they have to play Sacramento, Louisville, which is the first game on CBS, and Charleston. So this is one that if the results aren't quite there yet, just to understand that this may not be a finished product after 6 games.
Sacramento and Louisville, spoiler, are the number 1 seeds in the respective conferences by you, the viewers. So not easy.
Putting that derby on main CBS too is
oldest
derby
sick. In the world, oldest derby in history. One of my favorite bits. That one's one of my favorites. Coming in at 6th. Sitting right in the peak of mediocrity, it's my Birmingham Legion and Phil's El Paso Locomotive, which
we're tied together forever, Kaylor, and we're just always going to finish in the same spot, always going to have the same hot and cold runs. Like we're just our destinies are tied.
Let's talk a little El Paso first, and I want to agree with something that you put on Twitter. New Mexico, that right now it has El Paso finishing less than El Paso, like New Mexico over El Paso. For me, I love El Paso's offseason. I think one of the most underrated, not enough love for moves is this Bolu Akinyote over to El Paso. He's one of the best central midfielders in this league that can do a double as a center back. I love El Paso's offseason right now, just like last year. The question is, can they put it together? I don't even care about 32, 34, 34 matches. Can they put it together for 24? Can they put it together for a majority of the season?
Yeah, I think when you look at the business that they've done, obviously it was a big change from Brian Clairhout, who favored European-based signings last year, and then I think found it to be difficult to navigate like visa and all that sort of stuff. Like it can be a long time before those players are available. So he went for a bunch of USL based talent. Obviously, having a year in the league, he got some good minutes, like seeing these guys and seeing them on tape. I think in general, like I really like the business. Jamali Waite bringing in the number one keeper from the best team in the league, like is never really a bad thing, especially a team that was among one of the best defenses. Elijah Martin snagged from San Diego. Plus, you said Bolu. I think he is a real key in this offseason. I love the spine, and I think like what they've got through defense and midfield really feels strong. And it's not really a question mark up top so much as a question mark of how's it all going to fit together, because the names that they brought in up top, Amando Moreno, Justin Dillon, Tumi Moshabane, Joaquin Rivas, like some very, very good goal scorers who were involved in a lot of goals last year. And obviously, none of them played together, and almost all of them played exclusively, minus Justin Dillon. They played on the left wing. I actually do remember that goal, Nicholas. And we actually did an interview with Jamali a little bit ago on my other podcast, Seriously Loco, where we asked him directly about that goal. And surprise, he wasn't like thrilled to talk about that moment. We asked him in the vein of how do you bounce back from adversity? You know, that's sort of, we weren't trying to rub it in or anything like that, because hopefully he avoids the turf monsters on Southwest University Park. But the bottom line, and in wrapping up with Locomotive, 6th feels correct, just in the sense that like I feel like this team is capable of being one of the best teams in the West. And we saw like the Jekyll and Hyde last season, when you get a few injuries, does this team have enough to withstand that? And can they get the attack firing in their preseason? They have not scored any goals against USL Championship opposition. So there is that question mark of like, will the chemistry up top will they get it going? Because once Lucho Soloniak went out of the team last year after that 5-0 loss in Phoenix, they basically lost any and all ability to score goals for essentially the rest of the season. And so obviously they're going to lean heavily on Moreno and Rivas, like from wide areas. And what is that going to look like? How are they going to link up, and how are they going to interact with each other? That's the biggest question mark for me, is just how does that attacking chemistry come together? If it does, if it clicks, I think they can be one of the best teams in the league.
And interestingly, looking at El Paso's schedule from the perspective of the teams they're playing in the Eastern Conference, they have road trips to Pittsburgh, Tampa Bay, and Charleston, with that Pittsburgh match being the final game of the season, and we'll get to those 3 teams later on in our Eastern Conference predictions. It's a really tough schedule to kind of draw the short straw from. And it's going to be crucial, since they have 2 separate 3-match homestands here, to really take advantage of the points earned in those games.
Let's quickly run over to Birmingham, where they lose a good bit of talent, losing pretty much almost all of their goal scoring from last year, going elsewhere. And there's a little bit of a question mark if one of their star midfielders, Matthew Corcoran, if he even survives to the beginning of the summer before he goes over to Europe. Like it gets to June 1st or July 1st, whichever one it is. and he could be well gone to Europe. And that's something that you're going to have to overcome. Last year, I said early on that this team was overperforming and it wasn't sustainable. And guess what? That was true. What I've seen this year, and the big question is going to be forward. Are you going to get the goals from the striker position? Maybe. But what I've seen this year early on is a much more repeatable process, a much more repeatable performance. I think this is the best Legion team I've seen so far. Does that mean they can keep up with the big guns of the rest of the East? I don't know. My heart says yes, but I'm also looking at the rosters of other teams, and it's hard for me also to say yes that they can. So it is what it is. I feel like 6th is about right. Fans' expectations of host playoff matches, they should. This roster, if you look at names on paper, it should host playoff matches. But this is where we start talking once again that the top of the East is just a slog.
And just one home game in the first 6 matches of the season is a very kind of tough draw to open up the year.
Thanks a lot, Monster Truck Rally and spring football. That is real.
I love USL Championship scheduling conflicts. They are hilarious.
But if you get to see The Rock in Birmingham, it'll all be worth it.
I didn't even go. I didn't even watch that WWE. I'm just, whatever. It was all for nothing. Let's go ahead and move on to number 5, where we have new kids on the block, Rhode Island FC, and some old kids on the block. I don't know. Whatever. I can't make that connection. New Mexico United. One Rhode Island who, hey, like we said, brand new on the block. And when you look at names on roster, that starting 11 is spicy. But when you look at New Mexico, hey, you may not be in love with what you see on the roster, but if you look at how they played last year and they can continue how they ended last year, if they can keep that up, that is going to be a fun team to watch.
Are you gonna make me talk about New Mexico United? No, I like my big question marks about New Mexico United is sort of similar to the question marks about El Paso, but the question marks feel bigger because it's up top, Marco Micheletto, Greg Hurst, Mukwele Okale. Can they all get to grips with the championship? Hurst has obviously, like, he's just not quite clicked like at a championship level after that amazing season in Omaha. Micheletto and Okale, good solid players. Micheletto is MLS Next Pro, I think. Like, not
he came from Columbus Crew too.
Yeah. But Okale obviously trying to get to grips from League One to the championship, and similarly Next Pro to the championship. Forwards making that jump often, it takes time. I'm not saying that it's impossible, but it does take time. Christian Nava returning from a really serious injury. Amano Moreno did it like a year before and had a great season last season. So it's not like by any stretch of the imagination gonna be nothing. But will they have the firepower? And then will they be able to avoid some of the like silly goal concessions that they had last year? Defensively, they weren't quite as solid as they like have been kind of in the past. Ryden, Tambakis, like, are they going to be able to kind of get back to the level? Zico Bailey was awesome for them last year. So if they can continue that, I do think they'll be obviously in the playoff conversation. I think it's a good team. When I'm looking at this, I was surprised to see that they were above Locomotive, and I'm willing to bet. I'm working on something with a New Mexico podcast right now on like what that bet might end up being, but I will call it now and put it on the record that I think Locomotive finish above New Mexico for what it's worth. But I just think it has to come down to them figuring out like this attacking balance, because the rest of the team is good.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Greg Hurst, who only scored 4 goals for New Mexico last year. And it's interesting for at least how we've paired these teams together. As March 16th, we'll have New Mexico traveling to Rhode Island FC, which is the perfect segue to talk about the new kids in the Eastern Conference of Rhode Island FC, and friend of the show, Connor Smith, making an appearance as his first kind of full-time managerial job. And I think it's certainly a team that everyone's have down as the trendy pick to host a home playoff game. And it's going to be about if they can get those results against these 4 teams in front of us, who by all accounts, everyone has basically said is the established top 4 of the Eastern Conference and has been for the longest time.
Kind of speaking on this Rhode Island team, and I know it sounds like I'm kind of slandering this Rhode Island team when I say I don't believe in the depth. Listen, when your starting 11 is JJ Williams, Albert Dikwa, who ridiculous goal scorer last year, Golden Boot, and it wasn't close. Brito, Yabara, McGlynn, Sadie, Alvis, Stoneman, Nadarse, Turnbull, and Coque Vegas. That's disgusting. Simply put, that's just straight up disgusting. I don't know what to do with it, because once you start getting into the bench, there are good bench pieces, but a lot of unproven bench pieces that could be very good. This is the wonderful part about the USL. We get newcomers every single year. You don't know. And when you don't know, it's hard to predict, right? So for me, I wouldn't have them high as 5th, but according to Raising Anchor, 8% of their preseason goals have come from depth. Well, look at me. I'm an idiot. But that's just when I'm thinking about the long thing of the season. I don't know if I put them 5th, but that's because I just don't know what their bench is. But also, your starting 11 does play majority of your minutes, and that starting 11 is, like I said, disgusting.
What's going to be really interesting is from the end of March to the middle of April, they'll be playing Tampa Bay, Charleston, and Pittsburgh, the latter 2 of those games at home in consecutive weeks. And that's a really big measuring test for where the team is going to lie within the Eastern Conference.
The other question mark here is we haven't always seen goal scorers go just like, you scored 20 goals here and we move you to another team and you just add 20 goals. Like, it's not a given that that's going to happen. So playing devil's advocate, like, they are going to have to develop a bunch of chemistry quickly and like get to a place where, like, that system in Pittsburgh, Dikwa thrived in. Dikwa also contributed 0 assists. So like, you know what you're getting in Dikwa, in that, like, he is going to be a pure number 9, and Williams is going to have to do a bulk of the like playing off of him and stuff. And don't get me wrong,
he did it with Tampa Bay with Cal Jennings last year.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, if I'm going to pick 2 people to do it, it's probably them, but it's never been them specifically. Like, so it is just going to be about Kano getting them up to speed. I think they'll be strong. They'll obviously be fun to watch. Tons of talent. And as far as expansion teams go, we have never seen an expansion team come out of the gates like swinging like this Rhode Island team in this offseason. So whatever happens, like, credit to them for taking these big swings, and they are going to put a really fun team on the field.
Yeah, let's go ahead and move on to our home playoff spots. It is inevitable. Pittsburgh in at the number 4. They are truly inevitable. And then on the other side, you have Orange County SC. I want to start off with Pittsburgh because I think this is, weirdly enough, I think finally USL fans are respecting the Lily Ball a little bit, because yes, they just won the Players Shield. This one's not a Supporter Shield because that's very different. They just won the Players Shield. You would think that would mean they run it back, but the fact that they lost so many of those pieces and fans are still saying they're going to finish 4th because Lily Ball, I think he's weirdly enough finally getting that respect.
It's the respect, but it's also I mean, it is it's the Breaking Bad. He can't keep getting away with this. Like me, like don't get me wrong. There are still very, very good pieces in this Pittsburgh team. I mean, Conrado Forbes is going into his, 500th season in Pittsburgh, and him and Robbie Mertz, like they are, plus Danny Griffin. It's like nothing's changed in that midfield. They know exactly what Bob expects of them. Like defensively, they've got like tons of depth, and they just don't have Kizza up top, but it's like that's sort of it, like where it's like, where are the goals going to come from? And then you just ask yourself, with Lily Ball, does it matter? Or is Edward Kizza about to score a zillion goals? Like, who knows?
Well, I mean, we said the same thing. We were like, well, who's their goal scorer going to be? And then it was Dikwa, who had one of the most Carmelo Anthony seasons of all time. I mean,
yeah,
Lily Ball don't stop.
On paper, both of these teams I put lower. Like, I think both of these teams are too high. But Orange County, I think you have more of a case for. But anyway, sorry, Ryan.
I mean, you're looking at a Pittsburgh team who lost 3 of their top 4 players in terms of minutes played from last season, but Bob Lilly just wills his teams to just get results, and that's how they've done it since he's arrived in Pittsburgh, and it's just one of those managers that you just simply cannot count out.
I mean, can I make a stupid baseball analogy? Pittsburgh Riverhounds are the Tampa Bay Rays of the USL. They never keep around the highest producing people, and yet they just are always there. Oh, the Pittsburgh just picked up your striker who has never scored a goal for you. It's just like whenever the Rays say, hey, we're trading for your minor league pitcher, your relief pitcher. It's like, oh, dear God, he throws 105 now. When did that happen? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. It's dumb, and yet here we are. We have them predicted to finish 4th. They'll probably finish 2nd because Lily Ball. I don't know. It's
Bob Lilly's Pittsburgh Riverhounds has the same consistency that I would say like early 2010s Arsenal under Arsene Wenger had.
They are always going to finish 4th. No, the one thing that's out there that's been like pretty widely reported, I think, is Keziah Sterling might be trialing with them.
Disgusting. And
so that could be a game changer for sure.
And if EJ Johnson, who was another trialist that was up there, goes up there, he is just a perfect whatever. This team is gross. Let's go over to Orange County. Orange County, they really put it on last year. I am very excited for what they put on the field. They're going to have to live a world now without that guy on the pitch. First time in 2 years, 3 years. You're going to have to learn how to score goals fully without a winger kind of guy who did everything for you. Can they? I'm sure they can, but can they get it? Can they get enough pieces to score? I don't know.
This is
a third of their goals.
Yeah. I think I've made the joke in the past. I don't know if it's about Milanowski, but this is Moneyball. Like the Orange County's front office literally said, like, we can't replace Milanowski, but we can recreate him in the aggregate. Like that. Like I think like the question is, have they done enough, like, right, to replace him? I love Christian Sordo. I think he's an absolute menace on his day. Like one of the worst players to play against in the USL when he's like on his A game. Between Thomas Among and Ethan Zubak, like, is it enough like firepower at the 9? I think they're both like good forwards. And again, like on their day, absolute menaces to play against, difficult to play against. And down the stretch last season, like they really relied on Olaski's goals. I think their last 4 games of the season or something like that, they won 1-0. Like they won 3 of them 1-0, all Milan Olaski goals. Like they really are reliant on him. And so, like you said, life after Olaski, like can they compete? I think this is a very good squad. And without that X factor of Olaski, like, will they hang out in the top 4 in the West? Like, I think they're going to be closer to that chasing pack of like New Mexico, El Paso. Like, I think they're going to be closer to that than closer to, Sacramento or something like that.
I mean, there's another forward there that isn't being talked about yet, but should be on everybody's radar. Bryce Jamison might be the next coming. Like, he looks incredible. And I understand that we all kind of saw the USL Academy, was it finals or semifinals, that he put up a first half, maybe like first 30-minute hat trick. I mean, he looked like a grown man amongst boys. And he was one of the average age kids. It wasn't like he was just on top of the age group and then just like scored a bunch of goals. He was like average. He could be the difference here. He could be your one that steps up. He might be the one that makes up the rest of the quote unquote aggregate. Bryce Jamison's a real talent. Let's go ahead and move on to our third place. And this is where I need to tell you about the third place. For the East, our first, second, and third was separated by a total of 0.3 points. So if you say, we don't like the way that this went. Oh my God, my cat is destroying everything. Thanks, dude. If you don't like how this went, I don't want to be the person to say no vote, no opinion. But in this situation, seriously, no vote, no opinion, because this was separated by 0.3 points. If you disagree, you should have voted.
This is Kaylor telling everyone to start getting into fights into our replies, please.
Yeah.
I would like to zoom in at the very bottom. Information provided and voted by fans of each team. If you disagree, it's not our fault. Listen, Charleston, finalists last year. On the other side, San Antonio, who a lot of San Antonio, let's be honest, that we have a lot of San Antonio people who listen to this. Thank you. A lot of them believe in this team. So a lot of them predicted them to finish first, second, third, fourth, top 4. That gets you good votes, right? I think if you also look at the roster for San Antonio, it's really good. Like really good. But if you look at Charleston, they've gotten better since last year. I know they're missing Fidel Barajas. I know they're missing Traeger. I know they're missing Trey Muse. And sorry, Papa Muse, but I'm just saying your son, like Trey Muse wasn't. Hey, leave me alone on Charleston. Finished top 3. Finishes top 3 in the West. I did this at 2 a.m. Listen, Muse was not amazing last year. They did it at kind of best at times, just an average goalkeeper. If they get average goalkeeping play, they've replaced Traeger and Barajas, not fully, obviously, but they brought in good pieces. San Antonio, I feel like they're starting the season about where they were last year, and that's still a freaking good team.
I mean, what's interesting that I'm taking away from San Antonio is that despite losing 7 of their top 10 players for minutes played last year, they still have a lot of really good pieces here. I'm actually really excited about the likes of Juan Aguadelo joining the side and Pablo Cistanega from Charlotte's at least area and going into their spot in goal, and that this should still be a very good San Antonio team that is coming into the Western Conference.
Yeah, I think Marcina has this way of sort of in a Lily way, like he just kind of blows it up like every single year. where last year they were super reliant on a bunch of loanees and like short-term contracts. And I don't know exactly like what was going on. Obviously something about their build was forcing their hand, I think, a little bit in that way. They've obviously gone and done a bunch of business that I think is positive. The big sort of marquee name, obviously, recently, Kevon Lambert, like going and snagging him from a Western Conference rival. And well, maybe that's like the name of the game because they've got Lucho Solaniak as well from El Paso. They are sort of running it back with Patino, but all that being said, like they do this sort of like reset every once in a while. The question is like, can they again like fight through that? Like, hey, we're building a team and we're like getting cohesion. And I know we're saying that for a lot of these teams, but the reality for San Antonio is when, like Ryan said, like when you're losing that many minutes out of a team, like you're inevitably going to be building that back in terms of your style of play and everything. So Marcina's done it like a number of times where he's kind of blown up the whole project and just, you know, or loses a bunch of starters and just comes back and does it. Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of getting to the point of like, is it just foolish to bet against San Antonio like being up in the conversation? Because a lot of people would have said that they weren't even that good last year and they still finished like third in the West. So
I want to go over to Charleston unless you have something, Ryan, for San Antonio. Trey Muse, I don't necessarily mean Trey Muse bad, but Trey Muse, I think there were other keepers in the USL who deserve to jump up to MLS a little bit more.
And if you're looking at Charleston goals allowed last year, they allowed 43 compared to their 47 scored, which is indicative of some issues at either defense or in goalkeeping.
Yeah, my thing with Trey Muse was that I think last year he was pretty clearly the weak link. And that's what I mean by he wasn't bad. He was just average. And when you're the average player on a freakishly good team, you're seen as bad. And so if you can get average goalkeeping play again this year, then you know, you could be looking at a repeat. I like this Charleston roster a lot. So
I think them getting up to speed again, it'll be, they signed Air Malloy. Like that's a game changer no matter how you slice it. The LaCava signing I really like as well in terms of a Traeger like replacement, if that's how you want to think about it. Arturo Rodriguez, I mean, just he is him in Charleston, and especially down the stretch was just different. And then I like the fact, and this might sound a little hypocritical based on how I talked about New Mexico's attackers earlier, but I like the way that that Pierman is doing this in that he picked his like less experienced attackers as central strikers that will play with experienced attackers around them. So MD Myers, Jackson Conway, like these guys being able to thrive in a system with more experienced guys or more like dynamic, maybe guys ahead of them or around them to be able to create opportunities for them. I think it's the right sort of approach to like when you're trying to bet in new attackers, like surrounding them with those sort of players just feels like the right move in like helping guys make those jumps like from MLS Next Pro up to the championship.
Yeah. We'll get there with Zimla, but I mean, yeah, Zimla's been starting for Philly with Aaron Blake, with Andre Blake out. So, I mean, there's a lot of good goalkeeping going on in the USL. Check out for the glove of the game, please. Hashtag ad. Yeah, I like what Charleston's doing. The big one for me, Aaron Malloy, obviously. Mark Segbers gets a full season with the team, which that is a massive thing for this team. I I think that one again gets a little underrated, a little lost on the way. But Mark Segber is getting a full season with this team and getting out of Miami, which was stuck in being average at best. Yeah, I'm excited. Let's go ahead and move on to our number 2, which I have to scroll all the way down for. It is Tampa Bay versus Phoenix. This one, Tampa Bay was quite easily our biggest consensus pick. Almost everybody who filled it out said that Tampa Bay was the second best team in the East. It was kind of wild how many people said that.
Death taxes Tampa Bay home playoff game.
Yeah. And they will likely play Louisville City there because obviously. And then you have Phoenix, who they are second. And I want to start off with Phoenix because I'm not sold. Yes, they just won the championship. I recognize this. I know this. But they weren't amazing going into the playoffs. They were what, 6th, if I'm remembering off the top of my head correctly.
Correct.
Yeah, finished 6th.
And that was fine. But can they continue the hot streak? Can they build on it without Danny Trejo up there? Who, yes, like Pano was great, but Danny Trejo made it go. They lost a lot of pieces. They replaced it decently. I'm not sure if they're second, but I also think they're a home playoff team. And so you could probably flip almost any of these 1 through 4 in the West, and I'd be okay with it in that order.
And honestly, looking at their first 6 games of the season, that's a great opportunity for them to start banking points early and really build momentum until the tough part of their schedule really starts to ramp up through the summer. I mean, you have June 22nd, the rematch against Charleston, and then just to have something circled on the calendar, last week of the season, they play Louisville away at Lynn Family Stadium, which could very well be basically a preview of a conference semifinalist or finalist.
The really interesting thing about this Phoenix team is that, like, from going from like pretty mediocre throughout the regular season, they also were outplayed in many of those playoff games. Like, when you look at the raw sort of output and things like that, they obviously, from it is a results based game, and at the end of the day, like, they got the results, they found ways to win. I think there were many games, Sacramento like pops to mind, and then obviously the final. I think many people, and in terms of XG and like all this other stuff, like Charleston probably should have put them away quite early, and they didn't. But they're trying to recover from losing Trejo, losing Carlos Harvey, losing Manuel Arteaga. Like, these are some significant pieces. And while Erickson Gallardo and Derek Formella and Quajo, like, while those guys were all pivotal in moments in the playoffs and like played their part, them putting it together over the course of a season with those other pieces missing from the team is going to be a big question mark. Now, they've added Remy Cabral, who is a, amazing goal scorer, MLS Next Pro Golden Boot winner last year. So like, he obviously has a lot about him. And I think overall the business they've done has been okay. Like you said, Pano, I mean, he is electric up there, and he is probably going to be the focal point of the offense once again. I think the fans may be overshooting it a little bit, having them up in second. And I think it'll take like a pretty big performance from them, and them maybe overperforming a bit in terms of where I think this team is at. But they've kept the consistency with Danny Stone, so I think overall, like, they're going to be solid. It's just a question mark of really where is the ceiling for this team, because they're having to replace a lot of key pieces from that playoff run in particular.
And to their credit, we haven't had a team repeat as, I think, Western Conference champions since Swope Park did it in 16 and 17.
R.I.P. Swope Park.
Rest in peace. And let's go ahead and go to the other side of Tampa Bay, which I'm just going to read their lineup. Arteaga, Jennings, Leo Fernandez, Hilton, Dennis, Bodley, Guillen, Lasso, Doherty, Nick Moon, Jordan Farr. Gross.
Yeah. Blake Bodley, like, I think low key is one of the signings of the season.
I was going to say Nick Moon.
Well, and I mean, yeah, pick your San Diego Loyal wingback of poison, I guess. Blake Bodley delivering passes in for Arteaga and Jennings and Fernandez. Like, I mean, it's just I think this is going to be a little bit of a cheat code. I think Tampa Bay is going to be ridiculous this year. So I think it's actually an upgrade on last year, if you can even say that out loud.
I mean, it's an upgrade. The fact that you have Leo Fernandez back healthy.
People
forget how good he is.
I just hope he can bounce back. I mean, because being out with those like long-term injuries like that can sometimes, players don't always come back the same as they were before. So I just hope he bounces back in the way, and he just is, the Leo we all remember.
And among the most interesting kind of storylines to follow for this Tampa Bay team this year is the appointment of Robbie Nielsen and as their manager. I mean, you have someone who's gone to Scotland and has won the Scottish Championship 3 times across 2 different teams in Hearts and Dundee United, and a team or a manager who has over 300 matches. We talked about the experience that Brendan Burke has at this level. This is a very experienced manager with a very talented squad at his disposal.
John and I, it was funny whenever Robbie Nielsen was, talked about and he was announced. I think John and I posted the same tweet within seconds of each other of he's Neil Collins. And it's not just the Scottish thing. It's the Scottish defender managing the Rowdies. It'll never work. I don't think it's ever worked before. When you look at their style of play and you look at obviously their background, but yeah, their style of play, I mean, he's Neil Collins. And guess what? They built a roster that Neil Collins will be foaming at the mouth for. If you gave Neil Collins this roster, I think you might say they could win it all. And if Robbie Nielsen is the same manager, or at least at the same caliber, that plays a similar style, I think it could be incredible this year. Jordan Farr is, coming in as your keeper is amazing. You have Phil Breno there too. By the way, this is just a side comment. Has Sparrow been signed by anybody yet? Because I don't think he has, and that's a wild free agent that might just still be floating out there.
John Housen as a free agent still.
If you're a team that's looking to make even a marginal upgrade, oh God, could you imagine him at Charleston? Anyway, look, this Tampa Bay team, the more I look at the names on paper, don't get me wrong, I love what I see out of Louisville, and we're getting there in a second. The more and more I look at names on paper, I love this Tampa Bay team. But the thing that stops them for me is the same thing I said about Rhode Island. Their bench is better than Rhode Island's, but it's still thin. And I think that's what's really keeping them from being top. But speaking of your top seeds in each respective conference, we haven't talked about you. We waited till the very end because chances are you already know about these teams. Louisville City and Sacramento Republic. The biggest thing for me, I want to say this with Louisville City. Danny Cruz is a very polarizing figure. when I did these votes, I took the highest voted one, and that was the team, like what the fans voted for. I almost had to send messages to people into our USL show group chat of how do I rate this, because let's see if I can pull it up real fast. I had 23 votes for fully confident in Danny Cruz, and I had 13 votes for zero confidence.
Wow.
What do I do with that?
Just you just cut that baby in half, and you just put it right down the middle.
But neutral's not right, because neutral implies that people have no strong feelings either way, which clearly they do.
You should have just put confidence in Danny Cruz. It's complicated.
It's going to be very entertaining.
Louisville is it's a very strong roster. Obviously, there's a lot of consistency, although they have sort of the changing of the guard with Cam Lancaster and Del Piccolo and Oscar Jimenez like now moving on. It is a little bit of a change. I mean, the pieces they've added, like the main pieces they've added in terms of Ordonez, Gleedle, Davila, like very strong. And it's adding to an already strong base. I think Tola Shawunmi is also an underrated signing, because I thought he is like right on the cusp of being a very good breakout attacking talent in USL, and obviously was good in Pittsburgh last year. So yeah, I think they've got really, really good depth. I guess like Damian Laz at goalkeeper is maybe the question mark, not because he wasn't good. He was obviously he was like the best keeper in MLS Next Pro last year. I think he's probably a very good keeper. But maybe the question mark at a championship level, and just, replacing the guy who went to MLS. So yeah, I think rightfully so. It's a very tight margin between Tampa Bay and Lou City. They have really strengthened this year, though, Louisville. You'd be foolish to bet against them making it to the conference finals again.
Death taxes. It's ridiculous. Let's see. Let's go on over to Sacramento unless Ryan has anything to add. Sacramento, this one was the almost unanimous number one. There were a couple of people that didn't have them number one. We had one funny guy that put them down at 12th. You're hilarious. But it wasn't close on both sides. This was the only thing that was a bigger stand or a bigger unanimous decision than Sacramento won was the Miami being last. Everything else was kind of close. Sacramento, they kept everything and added.
Trevor Amon, like enough said from there.
Trevor Amon.
and you're adding that to a group that already had Russell Cicerone and is returning Rodrigo Lopez. Like, I mean, come on, man. And not to mention what they've got going on in the rest of the roster. Yeah, I mean, Gurr was like an MVP shout at right back, and you've got Damia Villader on the left, which like probably one of the best fullback pairings in USL. Yeah, they've got it all. And I mean, adding a guy like Amon when you've got those sorts of guys playing in wide areas and they're going to get the delivery, it's just, yeah, I don't really know what else to say about Sacramento aside from like, if this team feels like they are on like a war path to make it to the final this year and like will not be denied. I think it'll take something extremely special from someone else in the West to keep them from making it all the way to the final.
I mean, this is a team that's returning well over 80% of the goals they scored last year, and then added a person who scored 23 goals last season. What we're seeing from Sacramento this year is probably what we're going to see from Bayern Munich next season in the Bundesliga, because this is a team that is determined not to lose the league this year.
I mean, one person we didn't talk about with Tulsa earlier, that very, very big deal was probably the best player in League One last year. That's a hot take. I mean, Amon was fantastic, but when you look at Arthur Rogers, he was gross. Armand has two Arthur Rogers now serving him the ball.
I mean, yeah, basically.
If it puts it in perspective, anybody that watched RGV last year, which everybody had to at least once if you were watching your team, Jonathan Ricketts is on the bench for them. He's starting for almost every other team in the league. I think almost every other team you drop Jonathan Ricketts in, and he's starting, not in Sacramento.
Christian Pirano is on the bench. Like, he's like a depth option for Sacramento. That's insane. Like, and I think to be fair, I think Christian Pirano will actually get, like, he'll probably be a bigger part of this team this year because he's getting a full season, like a full off season and everything. So him playing like more of a bit part last year, I think, was sort of a one-off. But the reality is, like, when you've got Cicerone, Amon, and Lopez across the front three, any defense staring that down is going to be just like terrified.
Yeah. Well, look, this is the longest episode we'll probably do all season. We have next week is USL League One preview. Should theoretically be half the length because there's half the teams. So it won't. I'm still on the show, so it'll still probably be an hour and a half. You're welcome. Lots going on. Fun kit season coming up on Thursday for the glove of the game. Once games start going again, we're going to have that come out more regularly. It's going to be lots of fun. But gotta know, Ryan, what you been watching? What you been up to?
So yeah, I've still been going through The Bear. I'm halfway through season 1, but my big anticipation for at least media for this week is Dune Part 2 coming to theaters is going to be pretty exciting. Nonetheless, just because it's another very long film that I could add to my, repertoire of when a team goes through a very long goalless streak, I could just measure it against both Dune films. And I guess for my first usage of it, at this mark, we would still have an hour of runtime left in Dune 2 of what we've accomplished in tonight's episode.
Hey, so shorter than Dune 2. That's like, that should be the title. Our USL Championship preview. It's shorter than Dune 2.
Now I'm about to put that in the description. Phil.
I am excited to see Dune. That will be. I've just been hearing like nothing but good things. I'm also a show that just dropped today. Another FX like Hulu show called Shogun, which is set in like feudal Japan. It is getting like insane reviews and is like, what if it's basically like, what if a show about feudal Japan had like the budget and like intensity of Game of Thrones? So yeah, definitely looking forward to that. I actually have had a friend texting me as he's watching the first episode and is like, it's just exclamation points and emojis. So yeah, looking forward to that one.
Let's see. I'm not sure if I'm going to be on the show next week. Basically, the band that I teach, we have our big like assessment, like performance next Tuesday night. They didn't know that it was so special to me. I don't know what's wrong with them. But send good vibes next Tuesday. Just good vibes my way. Also, I'm not going to put this out on socials until March 1st. So I think that's a Friday. But if you're still listening, you get a sneak preview. The USL show kits, the splatter kit that has wrapped up. We are going to be sending over $300 over to Backyard Footy. So that should be going out on March 1st. You can check their page to make sure we did it. We always do, but just if you want to see. But that's going to be going out on socials later. You get a little preview about it. We are so excited about that. We always want to do things to help the community around us. So if you have communities or if you have charities that you are a part of, any USL person, if you are with the club, if you are with the league, or if you just are a fan of a USL team that's actively involved in charity in your community, DM us or email us at theuslshow@gmail.com. Email us, let us know about it. We want to help. We want to be a part of it. So yeah, super excited about that. And with all that, unless anybody has anything else, I'm about to fall asleep on a mic. Even though he wasn't here, because he's probably also falling asleep on a mic. Here is Alan's voice.
Thank you for watching another episode of the USL Show. The USL Show is now proudly part of the Protagonist podcast family. Please go to protagonistsoccer.com to check out more work. Thanks for stopping by. We'll see everyone again next time.